You're making a mistake, Signorina Russo. Valentina's fingers froze over her laptop keyboard. The voice came from the shadows of her office, deep and measured, carrying the kind of authority that made her pulse quicken. She hadn't heard anyone enter. The building was supposed to be empty. It was past midnight, and she'd stayed late to finish the Moretti account analysis. Who are you? She kept her voice steady, though her hand slowly reached for her phone. How did you get in here? A man stepped into the dim light, cast by her desk lamp. Tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly salary, with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble. His eyes were the color of espresso, and they studied her with unnerving intensity. My name is Lorenzo De Luca, and I'm here to save your life, he said, moving closer. Though you don't know it yet, you're standing on a landmine. Valentina stood, positioning her chair between them. I don't know what you're talking about. If you don't leave immediately, I'm calling security. Security won't help you. Not against the Marchetti family. Lorenzo placed a manila folder on her desk. The account you've been working on? Moretti Industries? It's a front for one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in Southern Europe. And tomorrow morning, when you present your findings recommending deeper investment, you'll be signing your death warrant. Her breath caught. That's insane. Moretti Industries is a legitimate shipping company. I've verified every falsified document they wanted you to see. Lorenzo opened the folder, revealing photographs, financial statements with red circles highlighting discrepancies she'd missed, and surveillance images of men she recognized from her research meetings. Your due diligence was excellent, Signorina Russo. So excellent that you've uncovered irregularities you don't even realize are there. The Marchetti family doesn't leave loose ends. Valentina's mind raced. She'd noticed small anomalies, things that didn't quite align, but her supervisor had assured her everything was verified. She looked at the evidence before her, and her stomach turned. Why are you telling me this? What do you want? I want you to walk away from this presentation. Tell your firm you're sick. Take a vacation. Disappear for a while. Lorenzo's expression softened almost imperceptibly. I've been watching you for 3 weeks, Valentina. You're brilliant, dedicated, and you have no idea how dangerous the world you've stumbled into really is. You've been watching me? Anger flared through her fear. Who are you really? Why should I trust anything you say? Because unlike the Marchettis, I'm giving you a choice. Lorenzo straightened his cuffs, a gesture that seemed almost casual, but carried weight. And because I'm the only thing standing between you and a very permanent solution to their problem. Before Valentina could respond, Lorenzo placed a business card on her desk. My number. When you're ready to hear the whole truth, call me, but do it soon. The Marchettis move quickly. He turned toward the door, then paused. And Valentina? Don't go home tonight. Stay with family. Stay in a hotel. But don't follow your routine. Not until we talk again. Then he was gone, leaving behind only the folder, the card, and Valentina's shattered sense of security. She stood frozen for a long moment before her hands began to shake. Everything in her wanted to dismiss this as some elaborate prank or intimidation tactic. But the evidence in that folder was real. She recognized forensic accounting when she saw it, and these documents revealed a pattern of money laundering so sophisticated she'd never have caught it without help. Valentina grabbed her phone and the folder, stuffed both into her bag, and left the office. She didn't call Lorenzo, not yet. Instead, she drove to her mother's apartment in the suburbs, where her younger sister Bianca was staying while attending university. The next 3 weeks were a blur of paranoia and investigation. Valentina had called in sick, claiming a family emergency, and then used the time to verify Lorenzo's claims independently. Everything checked out. Moretti Industries was indeed a front, and the Marchetti family was real, a powerful cartel with connections throughout Italy and beyond. She'd avoided calling Lorenzo, stubbornly maintaining her independence, but his warnings had likely saved her life. The colleague who'd taken over her presentation had been in a car accident 2 days after recommending against the Moretti investment. He survived, but was hospitalized with serious injuries that police called suspicious. Valentina knew she couldn't hide forever. Her firm was pressuring her to return, and she needed answers. She needed to understand who Lorenzo Duca really was and why he'd helped her. And the opportunity came when her firm sent her to Naples for a mandatory conference on international investment strategies. Valentina accepted, grateful for the change of scenery and the chance to think clearly away from Milan's suffocating fear. Naples was alive with energy. The conference hotel overlooked the bay, and on her first evening, Valentina escaped the networking events to find a small trattoria recommended by the concierge. She needed real food, real people, and a moment to breathe. The restaurant was tucked into a narrow street near the waterfront, family-owned and bustling with locals. Valentina secured a small table on the terrace and ordered pasta alle vongole and a glass of white wine. The sea breeze carried the scent of salt and lemon trees, and for the first time in weeks, she felt the knot in her chest begin to loosen. "That's the best choice on the menu." Valentina looked up to find a man standing beside her table, and her heart stopped. He looked exactly like Lorenzo Duca. Same height, same build, same impossibly handsome features. But something was different. Where Lorenzo's presence was controlled and measured, this man radiated warmth and easy confidence. He wore a linen shirt with rolled sleeves, and his smile was disarming. "I'm sorry. Do I know you?" Valentina managed, though her mind was reeling. Was Lorenzo following her? Had he changed his appearance somehow? "I don't think so, though I'd certainly remember if we'd met." The man gestured to the empty chair. "May I? I promise I'm not usually this forward, but you look like you could use some company, and possibly a recommendation for dessert." "I'm fine. Thank you." Valentina's voice was cool, defensive. She couldn't reconcile what she was seeing. "I prefer to eat alone." "A woman who knows her own mind. I respect that." But he didn't leave. Instead, he called the waiter over and ordered in rapid Neapolitan dialect, then turned back to her with that easy smile. "I'm Leonardo, and before you ask, yes, I know I'm being presumptuous, but life's too short for excessive formality, don't you think? I think you should respect when someone says no." But Valentina was curious now, studying him. If this wasn't Lorenzo, then who was he? The resemblance was impossible to ignore. Leonardo laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to light up his entire face. "You're absolutely right. I apologize. It's just, you looked so serious sitting here alone. And Naples is a city for joy, not worry. Whatever's troubling you, let it go for one evening. Try the Delizia al Limone when it arrives. My treat, no strings attached. If you still want me to leave after that, I'll disappear like morning fog." Despite herself, Valentina felt her guard dropping slightly. This man's energy was so different from Lorenzo's intensity. Where Lorenzo had been all sharp edges and calculated moves, Leonardo seemed spontaneous and genuine. "You're very persistent. Only when something's worth the effort." Leonardo leaned back, giving her space. "And before you worry, I'm not trying to pick you up. Well, not just that. I'm trying to remind you that Naples exists to be experienced, not just survived. The waiter arrived with an enormous slice of lemon cake that looked like it had been blessed by angels. Valentina hadn't ordered it, but the sight made her smile despite her reservations. "See? Already working." Leonardo grinned. "Now, you don't have to tell me your name or your story. Just enjoy that cake, watch the sunset over the bay, and remember that sometimes the best moments are the unplanned ones." They talked for 2 hours. Valentina didn't reveal much about herself. She was too cautious for that, but Leonardo told stories about Naples, about his love for the city's chaos and beauty, about his family's restaurant business and his goddaughter's recent birthday party. He was charming without being oily, interested without being intrusive, and when he finally stood to leave, Valentina found herself genuinely disappointed. "Thank you for the cake," she said, "and the conversation. The pleasure was mine. Oh, mysterious lady of the serious expressions." Leonardo pulled out a card, different from Lorenzo's, she noted immediately, and placed it on the table. "If you're in Naples again and want a real tour, not the tourist version, call me. I promise more excellent food and absolutely no pressure." He left, and Valentina sat alone with his card and her confusion. Two men, identical in appearance, completely different in manner. It couldn't be a coincidence. She returned to her hotel and spent the night researching the Duca family. What she found made her blood run cold. Lorenzo and Leonardo Duca, twin brothers, both 34, born to the most powerful crime family in Italy. Lorenzo managed operations in the north with precision and strategy. Leonardo controlled the south with charisma and street-level loyalty. Together, they ran an empire that stretched from shipping to politics to construction. And she'd encountered both of them within a month. The conference ended, and Valentina returned to Milan with more questions than answers. She'd been avoiding Lorenzo's calls, but she couldn't avoid him forever. The manila folder still sat in her apartment safe, and the Marchetti situation hadn't resolved itself. 2 days after her return, Valentina's supervisor called her into a meeting. Her stomach dropped when she entered the conference room and found both Lorenzo and Leonardo sitting at the table. She stopped in the doorway, frozen. Her supervisor, oblivious to her shock, smiled broadly. "Valentina, excellent. I'd like you to meet our new clients, Lorenzo and Leonardo Duca. They're interested in a comprehensive financial restructuring of their family's holdings, and I recommended you specifically for the project." Lorenzo's expression was unreadable, professional. Leonardo's eyes widened slightly in recognition, then crinkled with that warm smile. Neither acknowledged their previous encounters. "Signorina Russo," Lorenzo said smoothly, standing to shake her hand. His grip was firm, controlled. "We've heard impressive things about your analytical skills." "And your discretion," Leonardo added, his handshake warmer, lasting a fraction longer. "We value both highly." Valentina's supervisor beamed, completely missing the undercurrents. "I'll leave you three to discuss the preliminary details. Valentina, the Ducas have requested you specifically for this project. It's a tremendous opportunity." When the door closed, Valentina remained standing, her hands gripping the back of a chair. "What is this? What are you doing?" "Giving you a choice," Lorenzo said calmly. "Sit down, Valentina. We need to talk. And this time, you need to listen." "You lied to me in Naples," she said to Leonardo, anger and confusion warring in her voice. "You pretended you didn't know me." "I didn't lie. I genuinely didn't know you." Leonardo's expression was sincere. "My brother apparently did, but Lorenzo and I don't share everything. We're not joined at the hip, despite what genetics suggest. Sit down. Lorenzo's voice carried command now, and Valentina found herself obeying despite her better judgment. We don't have much time, and you need to understand the situation you're in. Lorenzo opened his briefcase and pulled out another folder, this one thicker. The Marchetti family knows you received information about their operation. They don't know from whom, but they know you're a liability. Your firm, trying to protect their reputation, has quietly distanced themselves from you. This opportunity they've given you, it's a way to isolate you, make you someone else's problem. That's insane, Valentina protested, but her voice lacked conviction. She'd noticed the cold shoulders, the canceled meetings, the way her supervisor's warmth had turned perfunctory. It's business, Leonardo said more gently. And now, you're in our world, whether you wanted to be or not. The question is, what do we do about it? We. Valentina looked between them. Why do you care what happens to me? The brothers exchanged a glance, some silent communication passing between them. Lorenzo spoke first. Because you're exceptional at what you do, and we need someone with your skills and integrity. Our family is transitioning, moving operations toward legitimacy, and we need someone who can navigate both worlds. And because, Leonardo added, walking away now means leaving you to the Marchettis. That's not something either of us is willing to do. Valentina's mind raced through possibilities, implications, and the very real dangers she'd been trying to ignore. What exactly are you proposing? Lorenzo slid a contract across the table. Work with us. Legitimately restructure our holdings. Help us build legal enterprises, and in return, we protect you and your family from the Marchettis and anyone else who might consider you a target. You want me to work for the mafia, Valentina said flatly. We want you to work toward changing it, Leonardo corrected. Our father's empire was built on old methods, old violence. Lorenzo and I want something different for the next generation. We need someone who understands finance but isn't corrupted by it. Someone who can see the bigger picture. And if I refuse? Lorenzo's expression didn't change. Then you walk out of here, and we never contact you again. But the Marchettis don't go away. Your firm doesn't suddenly value you again. You're alone in a world that's already marked you as expendable. It was the truth, harsh and unvarnished. Valentina looked at the contract, and then at the two men who somehow represented both her greatest danger and possibly her only safety. The brothers were identical in appearance, but opposites in energy. Lorenzo's calculating intensity, balanced by Leonardo's warm pragmatism. I need time to think, she said finally. You have 24 hours, Lorenzo said. After that, we need to make moves to protect you, whether you agree or not. The Marchettis won't wait forever. Leonardo stood, and his voice was softer. For what it's worth, I hope you say yes. Not just for business reasons. I think you're someone worth knowing, Valentina Russo, and I think you're brave enough to see this through. They left her alone in the conference room, with the contract, and a decision that would change everything. Valentina sat in the silence, her analytical mind warring with her survival instincts, and realized that somehow, in the space of a few weeks, her entire life had been turned upside down by two men who were both dangerous and, possibly, the only honest people she'd encountered in months. She had 24 hours to decide if she was brave enough or desperate enough to step fully into their world. The choice, Lorenzo had said, was hers. But they all knew that in truth, the choice had been made the moment she'd uncovered the truth about Moretti Industries. Now, it was just a question. of whether she'd walk into the fire alone or with allies who might be as dangerous as the flames themselves. Valentina signed the contract at 11:47 the following night, 13 minutes before Lorenzo's deadline expired. She'd spent the day investigating every clause, every implication, and what she'd found surprised her. The contract was legitimate, almost aggressively so. It outlined her role as chief financial consultant for Duca Holdings, complete with a salary that made her current earnings look laughable, comprehensive insurance that extended to her mother and sister, and specific clauses protecting her from any illegal activity. She wouldn't be asked to launder money or hide assets. Her job was exactly what they'd claimed: help transition their empire toward legitimate business. The contract also included an NDA so comprehensive it would take her years to violate it even if she wanted to, and a termination clause that required 6 months' notice from either party. They weren't trapping her. They were binding themselves as much as her. Still, her hand had trembled when she'd signed. Lorenzo had received the signed contract via encrypted email and responded with a single line: "A car will collect you tomorrow at 8 a.m. pack for 3 days." Now Valentina sat in the back of a black Mercedes SUV, watching the Tuscan countryside roll past as they drove away from Milan. The driver was silent and professional, and Valentina had spent the 2-hour journey alternating between checking her phone and questioning every decision that had led her to this moment. Her mother had been surprisingly understanding when Valentina had called to explain she was taking a special consulting position that required temporary relocation. Bianca had been more suspicious, demanding details Valentina couldn't provide. But ultimately, her sister trusted her judgment. That trust felt like a weight now, sitting heavy in Valentina's chest. The car turned off the main highway onto a private road lined with cypress trees. In the distance, a villa emerged. Not the gaudy mansion she'd expected, but an elegant stone estate that looked like it had grown organically from the hillside over centuries. Terraced gardens cascaded down the slope, olive groves stretched toward the horizon, and the afternoon sun painted everything in shades of gold and amber. "We're here, Signorina," the driver said, his first words of the entire journey. The car stopped in a circular courtyard where a fountain burbled softly. Before Valentina could gather her bags, the door opened, and Leonardo appeared, dressed casually in dark jeans and a white shirt that made his tanned skin seem even darker. "Welcome to the ancestral pile," he said with that easy smile, offering his hand to help her out. "It looks like a museum, but I promise it has excellent Wi-Fi and actual heating." Despite her nerves, Valentina smiled. "That's your priority? Wi-Fi? You'd be surprised how many centuries-old estates skimp on modern amenities. Our grandmother refused to install air conditioning until she was 87. Said suffering built character." Leonardo grabbed her bag before she could protest. "Come on, Lorenzo's waiting in the library. We thought neutral territory might help for the initial conversation." Neutral territory. As if anywhere in a house owned by one of Italy's most powerful crime families could be neutral. But Valentina followed Leonardo through massive wooden doors, into a foyer that took her breath away. Frescoed ceilings soared overhead, marble floors gleamed beneath her feet, and artwork that probably belonged in museums hung casually on the walls. "Don't let it intimidate you," Leonardo said, catching her expression. "Most of it's reproduction. The real stuff is in climate-controlled storage. Insurance, you know." "Somehow I don't think the Duca family worries much about insurance fraud." Leonardo laughed, genuinely delighted. "Oh, I like you. You're going to fit in perfectly here." He led her through a series of corridors to a library that could have housed a small university's collection. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 3 walls, A massive fireplace dominated the fourth, and comfortable leather furniture was arranged around a central table where Lorenzo sat reviewing documents. He looked up when they entered, and Valentina was struck again by how different the brothers were despite their identical features. Where Leonardo's expression was open and welcoming, Lorenzo's was measured and assessing. "Valentina, thank you for coming." Lorenzo stood, buttoning his suit jacket in a gesture that seemed habitual. "I trust the journey was comfortable?" "It was fine." Valentina remained standing, maintaining distance. "You said we needed to talk, so talk." Lorenzo's lips quirked almost imperceptibly. Not quite a smile, but close. "Direct, good. We don't have time for games." He gestured to a chair. "Please sit. This will take a while, and you'll want to be comfortable." Valentina sat, and Leonardo settled into a chair nearby. His posture relaxed, but his attention focused. The brothers positioned themselves on either side of her. Not threatening, but definitely strategic. "What do you know about the Duca family?" Lorenzo began. "What I could find in public records and news archives. Your family has been involved in shipping, construction, and import-export for 4 generations. Suspected ties to organized crime, never prosecuted. Your father, Salvatore De Luca, died 3 years ago, and control passed to you and Leonardo jointly." Valentina met Lorenzo's eyes steadily. "You run the northern operations with a focus on legitimate business integration. Leonardo manages the south with emphasis on community relations and traditional family structures. Together, you're worth somewhere between 800 million and 2 billion euros, depending on which assets you actually control." "Not bad," Leonardo murmured. She did her homework. "What you couldn't find in public records," Lorenzo continued, "is that our father built his empire on blood, extortion, smuggling, contract killing, all the classic elements of organized crime. He was brilliant at it, ruthless, and completely uninterested in legitimacy. When he died, Leonardo and I inherited an empire that was powerful but unsustainable." "Unsustainable how?" Valentina asked. "Technology, surveillance, international cooperation between law enforcement. The old methods don't work anymore," Leonardo explained. "What our father built through fear and violence is crumbling. We can either adapt or watch it collapse while taking thousands of families down with us." Valentina frowned. "Families?" Lorenzo pulled out a folder. "These men and their folders." Valentina thought and spread photographs across the table. They showed restaurants, shops, apartment buildings, fishing boats, construction sites. Every one of these businesses is connected to De Luca operations. Some pay protection money because they're afraid. Others receive genuine support, loans when banks won't lend, protection from predatory competitors, community investment when the government fails. It's complicated. "We're not heroes," Leonardo said bluntly. "But we're not monsters either. We inherited a system that's both corrupt and necessary. The question is, can we transform it into something that doesn't require corruption to function?" "That's where you come in," Lorenzo said. "We need someone who understands complex financial systems, who can see the legitimate business opportunities within our existing structures, and who has the integrity to tell us when we're crossing lines that shouldn't be crossed." Valentina processed this, her analytical mind working through implications. "You want me to be your conscience." "We want you to be our strategist," Lorenzo corrected. "We already know right from wrong. What we need is someone who can show us the path between what we are and what we want to become, without destroying everything in the process." "And the Marchettis?" Valentina asked. "You said they were a threat. How does working for you solve that problem?" The brothers exchanged a look, and Leonardo spoke. The Marchettis are old school, like our father was. They see our transition toward legitimacy as weakness. They've been pushing into our territories, testing boundaries, trying to force a confrontation. Your knowledge of their money laundering operation makes you valuable, Lorenzo continued. If we have you, we have leverage. They can't touch you without risking exposure, and they know we'll use that information if they cross certain lines. So I'm a bargaining chip. Valentina felt cold. You're an asset, Lorenzo said flatly, but also a person we're choosing to protect. There's a difference. Is there? Valentina stood, anger flaring. You're using me as a shield in your criminal enterprise war games, and you want me to be grateful for the opportunity? Leonardo stood too, his expression serious now. You want the truth? Yes. You're useful to us strategically, but you're also in danger, whether we help you or not. At least with us, you have protection, resources, and the chance to actually change something meaningful. Change a mafia family? Make you legitimate? That's insane. Probably, Lorenzo agreed, still seated, still calm. But it's the only path forward that doesn't end in blood or prison. And despite what you think of us, Valentina, we're trying to build something different. We're trying to be better than our father was. The raw honesty in his voice stopped her. Valentina looked between the brothers. Lorenzo's controlled intensity, Leonardo's passionate sincerity, and realized they genuinely believed what they were saying. They were criminals, trying to reform an empire built on crime, and they needed her help to do it. Show me, she said finally. Show me what you're actually doing. Not the sales pitch, not the pretty words. Show me the reality of what I'm agreeing to. Lorenzo smiled, an actual smile that transformed his serious features. That's why we brought you here. For the next 3 days, you're going to see everything. The good, the bad, and the complicated. Then you'll decide if you can work with us. Truly work with us, not just fulfill a contract. Over the following 72 hours, Valentina received an education in the Duca Empire that no business school could have provided. Lorenzo took her through the northern operations, legitimate shipping companies that also moved contraband, construction firms that built both legal developments and fronts for money laundering, investment portfolios that mixed clean and dirty money so thoroughly that separating them required forensic accounting genius. He was honest about every aspect, answering her questions with clinical precision. This shipping route, he explained, pointing to a map in his office, carries legal automotive parts and illegal prescription drugs. The parts are profitable enough to sustain the route, but the drugs multiply the margins. We're transitioning to full legitimacy, but it takes time to replace that revenue. How much time? Valentina asked. 3 years, if we're strategic. 5, if we're cautious. 7, if we try to avoid any economic impact on dependent families. Lorenzo met her eyes. Which timeline would you choose? It was a test, Valentina realized. The cautious one. Rushing creates vulnerabilities that enemies can exploit. But 5 years assumes perfect execution. Plan for 7, execute for 5, hope for 3. Lorenzo's smile was approving. Exactly what I would have said. They worked late into the nights, Lorenzo teaching Valentina the intricate web of holdings, debts, alliances, and territories. She learned that the Duca Empire was less a monolithic organization and more a complex ecosystem, where legitimate businesses supported criminal operations, supported community investments in an endless cycle. It's not sustainable, she told him during one late-night session, pointing to her analysis. The illegal operations create too much risk exposure. One major investigation, and the entire structure collapses. I know, Lorenzo said quietly. That's why we're changing it. That's why we need you. During the days, Leonardo showed her the southern operations and a completely different side of the family business. He took her to fishing villages, where Duca money-funded schools the government had abandoned, to neighborhoods where their protection kept predatory loan sharks away, to restaurants and shops that thrived under their umbrella. I'm not saying it's right, Leonardo told her, as they watched children play in a newly renovated community center. But I am saying it's not black and white. These people depend on us. If we disappear tomorrow, who fills the vacuum? The Marchettis? Worse? You're rationalizing, Valentina challenged. Maybe. Or maybe I'm being realistic about the world we actually live in versus the world we wish existed. Leonardo turned to her, his expression intense. You want to know why I do this? Why I stay in the family business instead of running away to live on some beach somewhere? Why? Because my goddaughter, Maria, gets to go to a school with actual supplies and teachers who are paid enough to care. Because her father's restaurant doesn't get extorted by thugs who'd break his hands if he couldn't pay. Because when her mother got cancer, we made sure she got treatment at the best hospital in Rome. Leonardo's voice was passionate now. The system's broken, Valentina. We didn't break it, but while it's broken, I'm going to make sure the people I love survive it. Valentina saw him with children who climbed on him like he was playground equipment, with elderly shopkeepers who blessed him like a son, with families who genuinely seemed to love him. Leonardo wasn't performing for her benefit. This was who he was in his element, a man who carried responsibility for an entire community on his shoulders. On the third evening, both brothers joined her in the library for a final conversation. Valentina had spent the afternoon reviewing everything she'd learned, and she'd prepared questions. The Marchetti situation, she began. You said having me provides leverage. Explain exactly what that means. Lorenzo answered. The Marchettis have been pushing into our territories using the Moretti Industries front you investigated. They're moving drugs and weapons through shipping routes we used to control. Your analysis exposed their operations' vulnerabilities. With that information, we can either destroy their business or use it to negotiate a truce. You want to blackmail them. We want to create a mutually assured destruction scenario where neither side benefits from confrontation, Lorenzo corrected. It's diplomacy, just with different stakes. And if diplomacy fails? Leonardo's expression hardened. Then we defend our territory. But we'd rather avoid that outcome. Wars are expensive, bloody, and attract law enforcement attention we're trying to avoid. Valentina absorbed this. What do you need from me specifically? Continue your analysis of their operation, Lorenzo said. Build a comprehensive financial profile that shows exactly how their money moves. Then help us construct alternatives, legitimate business opportunities that replace the revenue they'd lose if we shut down their illegal operations. You want to give them a way out, Valentina said, understanding dawning. We want to give them a choice, Leonardo clarified. Just like we gave you one. Fight and lose everything, or adapt and build something sustainable. It was smart strategy, Valentina had to admit. Transform enemies into partners by making partnership more profitable than conflict. It was exactly the kind of long-term thinking that could actually change the fundamental dynamics of their world. I have conditions, she said. We expected you would, Lorenzo replied. Valentina stood, pacing as she organized her thoughts. 1. I need complete access to all financial records. I can't build strategy on partial information. 2. I need veto power over any decision that crosses legal lines I'm not willing to cross. 3. My mother and sister remain completely protected and completely ignorant of the details of what we're doing. Agreed to all 3, Lorenzo said without hesitation. I'm not finished. 4. We establish a timeline for full legitimacy. Specific, measurable milestones that we track quarterly. 5. We create a contingency fund for families affected by the transition, because I won't be part of leaving people destitute. 6. If at any point I believe you're lying to me or using me for purposes I didn't agree to, I walk away and you let me go. No retaliation, no threats. Leonardo whistled softly. She's tougher than you said. She's perfect, Lorenzo murmured. Then louder. Agreed. All 6 conditions. Anything else? Valentina faced them both. These identical men who represented such different energies. Yes. I need to know why you're really doing this. Not the strategic reasons, not the business case. Why do you actually care about changing the family? Leonardo answered first. Because I'm tired of being afraid. Afraid my goddaughter will get caught in crossfire. Afraid someone I love will pay for my father's sins. Afraid that everything I build will crumble because it's built on blood money. I want to sleep at night, Valentina. I want to build something I'm proud of. Lorenzo took longer to respond, his expression distant. Because our father was a monster who happened to be effective. He taught us how to run an empire, but he also taught us that power without purpose is just destruction in slow motion. When he died, I realized Leonardo and I had a choice. Become him or become something different. I choose different. Every day, I choose different. The honesty was almost painful in its rawness. These weren't criminals rationalizing their choices. They were men genuinely trying to escape a legacy they'd inherited. Okay, Valentina said quietly. I'm in, fully in. Not just fulfilling a contract, but actually partnering with you to make this work. The relief on both their faces was palpable. Leonardo stood and impulsively pulled her into a hug that surprised them both. You won't regret this. I promise you won't regret this. Lorenzo's approach was more measured, but when he shook her hand, his grip was warm. Thank you for trusting us, for taking this risk. Don't make me regret it, Valentina said, trying for lightness despite the emotion in the room. We won't, Lorenzo promised. Now, we should celebrate. Leonardo, call the kitchen. Valentina, do you like ossobuco? The evening that followed was surprisingly normal. They ate dinner in a smaller, more intimate dining room, and the conversation ranged from business strategy to art, to Leonardo's increasingly elaborate stories about his goddaughter's adventures. Valentina found herself relaxing, laughing, and seeing the brothers not as criminals, but as complex men trying to navigate impossible circumstances. She noticed things too. The way Lorenzo's eyes softened when he watched her debate points with Leonardo. The way Leonardo's smile lingered when she laughed. The way both brothers seemed to compete subtly for her attention. Though whether they realized it themselves, she couldn't tell. It was past midnight when Valentina finally retired to her guest room, a beautiful space overlooking the gardens. She stood at the window, looking out at the moonlit landscape, and allowed herself to acknowledge the truth she'd been avoiding for weeks. She was attracted to both of them. Lorenzo's brilliant intensity challenged her intellectually in ways no one ever had. Leonardo's warmth and passion made her feel alive and connected in ways she'd forgotten were possible. They were two halves of something extraordinary, and she was falling for both of them. It was impossible. It was inappropriate. It was absolutely going to complicate everything. But as Valentina prepared for bed in a villa owned by a mafia family, preparing to help transform a criminal empire into something legitimate, she realized that impossible had become her new normal. The only question was, what would she do about it? The Marchetti situation exploded 6 weeks after Valentina joined the Duca organization. She'd been working 16-hour days building the financial analysis Lorenzo needed, tracing money through shell corporations and offshore accounts with the focus of a surgeon. The patterns she'd uncovered were damning. The Marchettis weren't just moving drugs and weapons. They were funding human trafficking operations that made Valentina physically ill when she discovered them. "We can't negotiate with this," she told Lorenzo, throwing the reports onto his desk with shaking hands. "These aren't criminals trying to make money. They're monsters." Lorenzo studied the evidence with cold fury in his eyes. "I know. I'd hoped we were wrong, but I know." He looked up at her, and his expression was harder than she'd ever seen it. "This changes our strategy. We can't offer them partnership. We can only destroy them." "How?" Valentina asked. "By giving law enforcement everything you've found and letting them do our work for us." Lorenzo began making calls, his voice crisp and commanding. "It's cleaner, legal, and removes them from the board permanently." But the Marchettis moved first. Valentina was leaving the Duca Holdings office in Milan. They'd set her up with a legitimate corporate position as cover when a black van pulled up beside her. Men grabbed her, and she barely had time to scream before something covered her mouth, and the world went dark. She woke in a warehouse tied to a chair, with Antonio Marchetti standing before her. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 40, with expensive clothes and dead eyes. "Signorina Russo," he said pleasantly, "we have a problem. You've been collecting information about my family's business, and I need to know exactly what you found and who you've told." Valentina's training with Lorenzo kicked in. Say nothing, give them nothing, survive until help arrives. Because help would arrive. She had to believe that. Antonio's pleasant expression didn't change when she remained silent. "I understand. Loyalty to the Ducas, admirable but misplaced." He nodded to one of his men. "We have time. Let's start gently." The next hours were a nightmare. They didn't torture her, not really, but the psychological pressure was intense. Questions asked repeatedly, threats made against her mother and sister, promises of what would happen if she didn't cooperate. Valentina held on to one thought. Lorenzo and Leonardo would come. They had to come. They did. The warehouse doors exploded inward with a sound like thunder. Valentina looked up through blurred vision to see Leonardo striding in, with armed men flanking him. His usual warmth replaced by cold rage. Behind him, Lorenzo moved with lethal precision, his gun trained on Antonio Marchetti. "Let her go." Leonardo's voice was completely unlike anything Valentina had heard from him before. Flat, dangerous, absolute. "Let her go, and you get to walk out of here." Antonio laughed, pulling a gun and pressing it to Valentina's head. "I don't think so. She's my insurance policy now. Tell your men to stand down, or I paint the walls with her brain." Lorenzo's expression didn't change. "You're making a mistake, Antonio. We were willing to negotiate. We were willing to find a peaceful solution. But you touched something that belongs to us, and that changes everything." "She's a woman." "Not property," Antonio sneered. "Though, I suppose the Duca family has always been traditional that way." "She's family," Leonardo corrected, his voice deadly quiet. "And you just declared war." What happened next occurred so fast that Valentina barely processed it. Lorenzo fired, not at Antonio, but at the man beside him. Leonardo moved simultaneously, crossing the distance to Valentina in seconds. Antonio's gun discharged, but Leonardo had already pulled Valentina's chair backward, the bullet missing by inches. And then Lorenzo was there, his gun pressed under Antonio's jaw. "Your men are surrounded," Lorenzo said calmly. "My people have had this building locked down since Valentina was taken. You have one chance to leave here alive. Give the order to stand down, get in your car, and drive back to Rome. If you ever come near her, her family, or anyone under Duca protection again, I will personally make sure you disappear so thoroughly that your own mother won't find the pieces." For the first time, fear flashed across Antonio's face. He looked at the men around him, all with their hands raised, weapons on the ground, and made his calculation. "This isn't over, Duca?" "Yes," Lorenzo said quietly. "It is." Antonio and his men left, and the moment they were gone, Leonardo cut Valentina's bonds, while Lorenzo made rapid calls, ensuring the Marchettis were followed, tracked, and monitored. Valentina's legs gave out when she tried to stand, and Leonardo caught her, holding her against his chest. "I've got you," he murmured, and she could feel his heart racing. "You're safe. I've got you." Lorenzo finished his calls and approached, his hand gentle on her face as he checked for injuries. "Did they hurt you?" "No, scared me, threatened me, but didn't." Valentina's voice broke. "They said they'd kill my mother, my sister." "They're safe," Lorenzo assured her. "We moved them to a secure location the moment you were taken. They think it's a luxury vacation. They're fine, Valentina. Everyone's fine." The relief was overwhelming. Valentina started shaking, adrenaline crash hitting hard, and suddenly both brothers were supporting her, their presence solid and real and safe. "Let's get you out of here," Leonardo said. "Lorenzo, call the doctor to meet us at the villa." "Already done." Lorenzo's voice was tight. "And I've sent the complete Marchetti file to our contact in the federal police. They'll have warrants by morning." They took her to the family villa, where a doctor examined her and declared her physically unharmed beyond minor bruising. Emotionally was another matter. Valentina couldn't stop shaking, couldn't process how close she'd come to something terrible. Lorenzo and Leonardo stayed with her through the night, taking turns sitting beside her bed as she drifted in and out of anxious sleep. By morning, exhaustion had given way to anger. "I can't live like this," she told them when they gathered in the library. "Constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering if someone's going to use me to get to you. This isn't sustainable." "I know," Lorenzo said quietly. "We're handling it. The Marchettis will be arrested within 48 hours. Their entire operation is being dismantled as we speak. And the next threat, the one after that?" Valentina stood pacing. "You said you wanted to go legitimate, but legitimate businesses don't involve kidnappings and gunfights in warehouses." Leonardo's expression was pained. "You're right, and I'm sorry. We should have protected you better. Should have anticipated—" "I'm not blaming you," Valentina interrupted. "I'm saying we need to accelerate the timeline. 5 years is too long. We don't have 5 years." Lorenzo and Leonardo exchanged glances. "What are you proposing?" Lorenzo asked. "Aggressive divestment of illegal operations, immediate investment in legitimate alternatives, and public rebranding of the Duca family as legitimate business leaders." Valentina pulled out her laptop, opening files she'd been preparing. "I've been running scenarios. If we're willing to take some financial losses short term, We can transition 70% of operations to legitimate status within 18 months. 70% isn't enough, Leonardo said. What about the remaining 30? We isolate it, quarantine it into separate entities that can't touch the legitimate holdings, and systematically shut it down over 2 years. Valentina showed them her projections. It's aggressive, it's expensive, and it's risky. But it gets us out of the crosshairs faster. Lorenzo studied her analysis with growing approval. This is brilliant. Risky as hell, but brilliant. Leonardo. I'm in, Leonardo said, without hesitation. Whatever it takes to make sure yesterday never happens again. They spent the next month implementing Valentina's aggressive strategy. And during that time, something shifted between the three of them. The professional boundaries they'd maintained began to blur. It started innocently. Lorenzo began staying late to review documents with Valentina, their conversations drifting from business to philosophy to personal histories. She learned about his love for classical architecture, his secret passion for piano that he rarely indulged, his fear that he'd become his father, despite all his efforts to be different. You're nothing like him, Valentina told him one evening, reviewing contracts in his private study. Your father built through fear. You're building through strategy and vision. That's completely different. Lorenzo looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. You see me clearly, Valentina. You see who I'm trying to be, not who I was born to be. That's rare. The moment stretched between them, like charged with something neither acknowledged. Then Lorenzo returned to the contracts, and the moment passed. But Valentina felt its echo for days. With Leonardo, the connection was different, but equally powerful. He took her to community events, introduced her to the families who depended on Duca's support, showed her the human cost of every decision they made. After a particularly moving evening, watching children perform in a school play the family had funded, Leonardo turned to her. This is why I stay, he said quietly. These kids, these families, they matter more than my comfort or my conscience. If helping them means I have gray morality, I accept that. It's not gray, Valentina said. It's human. You're doing the best you can with impossible choices. That's not moral compromise. That's moral courage. Leonardo took her hand, squeezing gently. You make me believe we can actually do this, change everything, become something better. Valentina realized she was falling for both of them in completely different ways. Lorenzo challenged her intellectually, made her think deeper and dream bigger. Leonardo touched her emotionally, made her feel connected to something larger than herself. Together, they represented everything she'd never known she wanted. But she couldn't have both. That was impossible. The crisis came 3 months after her kidnapping. The Marchetti operation had been dismantled, but power vacuums created new threats. A smaller family, the Santoros, made a move for Duca territory, and Lorenzo needed to respond decisively. We're going to Rome, he told Valentina. High-level negotiations with the other families. We need to establish clear boundaries and expectations. I'm coming with you, Valentina said. Absolutely not, both brothers said simultaneously. Yes, Valentina insisted. I'm not hiding anymore. I'm part of this organization, and I need to be seen as essential, not protected. That's the only way to establish my legitimacy. Lorenzo looked ready to argue, but Leonardo spoke first. She's right. Hiding her makes her look weak. Bringing her makes her look powerful. It's the smart play. Lorenzo's jaw clenched, but he nodded. Fine, but you don't leave our sight. Not for a second. The Rome meeting was held in a luxury hotel conference room, attended by heads of 5 major families. Valentina sat between Lorenzo and Leonardo, acutely aware of the scrutiny from dangerous men who weren't used to women having power in their world. The negotiations were tense. Territory disputes, revenue sharing, mutual defense agreements, all discussed with the casual brutality of men who'd built empires on violence. Valentina contributed financial analysis that proved the economic value of cooperation over conflict, and she watched respect slowly replace skepticism in the eyes of the other family heads. "The DeLucas have always been smart," one elderly boss said, nodding toward Valentina. "Bringing in outside expertise shows wisdom. Perhaps we all should consider modernization." It was a victory, subtle but significant. Valentina had proven her value not just to the DeLucas, but to their entire world. That evening, back at their hotel, exhausted and wired with adrenaline, Valentina found herself alone, with both brothers in their suite. Leonardo poured wine while Lorenzo reviewed notes from the meeting. "You were extraordinary today," Leonardo said, handing her a glass. "Did you see Santoro's face when you broke down his revenue projections? Priceless. You made us look good," Lorenzo added, allowing himself a rare full smile. "Made us look like the future, while they looked like the past." Valentina sipped her wine, feeling the tension of the day slowly releasing. "I meant what I said in there. Cooperation is more profitable than conflict. If we can get the other families to see that, we can transform the entire structure." "We can," Lorenzo agreed. "With you guiding strategy, we actually can." The atmosphere in the room shifted, became charged with something unspoken. Valentina was aware of Leonardo's warmth on one side, Lorenzo's intensity on the other, and the impossible situation she found herself in. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly, setting down her wine. "Both of you." They gave her their complete attention, and Valentina took a breath. "I'm falling in love with you. Both of you. I know that's impossible and inappropriate and probably complicates everything, but I can't keep pretending I don't feel what I feel." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Leonardo spoke, his voice rough. "Valentina." "I know," she interrupted. "I know it's impossible. I just needed to say it out loud. I needed you to know." Lorenzo stood, his expression unreadable. "It's not impossible." Valentina looked up at him. "What?" "It's not impossible," Lorenzo repeated. "Complicated, yes. Unconventional, absolutely. But not impossible." He looked at his brother. "Leonardo." Leonardo was staring at Valentina with an expression of wonder mixed with pain. "I've been in love with you since Naples. Since you sat on that terrace looking serious and beautiful, and completely unaware of how extraordinary you are. I've been trying not to feel it, because you're Lorenzo's partner, and I didn't want to complicate things, but I'm in love with you too," Lorenzo finished quietly. "Have been since that first night in your office when you faced me without fear and demanded answers. I've been in love with your brilliance, your courage, your absolute refusal to be intimidated." Valentina's heart was racing. "This is insane. Both of you can't. This doesn't work in the real world." "Define work," Leonardo said, moving closer. "Because from where I'm standing, the three of us have built something extraordinary together. We trust each other, challenge each other, complement each other. Maybe the real insanity is walking away from that because it doesn't fit conventional expectations." Lorenzo knelt before Valentina, taking her hands. "We need to talk about this. Really talk about what's possible and what we're willing to try. But I need you to know that my feelings for you are real, Valentina. Completely real. Mine too, Leonardo said, his hand gentle on her shoulder. Valentina looked between them, these two men who'd become essential to her existence, and realized they were offering her something impossible and perfect and terrifying. I don't know how this could work. Neither do we, Lorenzo admitted. But I'd rather figure it out with you than spend my life wondering what we could have had. They talked through the night, honest and vulnerable, in ways none of them had ever been. They discussed feelings, boundaries, fears, and possibilities. It was messy and emotional and completely unprecedented. But by dawn, they'd reached an understanding. They would try. Slowly, carefully, honestly. They would try to build something that honored all three of their feelings without destroying the work they'd built together. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be conventional. But as Valentina sat between Lorenzo and Leonardo, watching the sun rise over Rome, she realized that nothing about her life had been conventional since the night Lorenzo had appeared in her office. Maybe unconventional was exactly what they needed. The proposal, on when it came, was as unconventional as everything else about their relationship. 8 months had passed since that night in Rome. 8 months of navigating an unprecedented relationship that defied every traditional boundary. Valentina had moved into the family villa, occupying a suite between Lorenzo's rooms and Leonardo's, a physical representation of her position between them. They'd developed rhythms that worked. Mornings with Lorenzo reviewing strategy over espresso in his study. Afternoons implementing those strategies with Leonardo visiting community sites. Evenings together, the three of them, talking and planning, and simply existing in each other's presence. The Duca transformation was ahead of schedule. 65% of operations were now completely legitimate, with the remaining 35% isolated and scheduled for systematic shutdown. Law enforcement attention had decreased as their public profile became cleaner. The other families watched with grudging respect as the DeLucas proved that modernization could be profitable. But the personal situation remained complicated. Valentina loved both brothers. That hadn't changed. Lorenzo's brilliant mind challenged her daily, his rare moments of vulnerability precious and deeply intimate. Leonardo's warmth surrounded her like sunlight, his passion for life infectious and essential. They were two halves of something complete, and she couldn't imagine her life without either of them. The brothers had accepted this reality with remarkable maturity. They discussed it extensively, sometimes including Valentina, and sometimes just between themselves, and reached a conclusion that respected everyone's feelings while acknowledging practical limitations. Something had to change. The current situation was sustainable emotionally, but impossible socially. In their world, appearances mattered. Legitimacy required respectability, and their unconventional arrangement, however much it worked privately, couldn't remain private forever. The family gathering was called for a Sunday dinner, and Valentina knew immediately something significant was happening. The villa's formal dining room was set with the good china. Extended family members were arriving, and both brothers wore matching expressions of nervous determination. "What's going on?" Valentina asked Leonardo as they prepared for dinner. "You'll see," he said, kissing her forehead gently. "Trust us?" "Always." The dinner was attended by uncles, aunts, cousins, and the family's most trusted advisors. Valentina sat between the brothers, as had become customary, fielding polite questions about her work and the family's business transformation. Everything seemed normal, until dessert was served and Lorenzo stood. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice carrying the authority of the family head. Leonardo and I called this gathering because we need to discuss the future of the Duca family. Specifically, the question of succession and leadership. Murmurs around the table. This was unexpected. Lorenzo continued. Our father built an empire, but he also built isolation. He trusted no one outside blood family, and that limitation nearly destroyed us. Leonardo and I have taken a different approach. We've brought in outside expertise, modernized operations, and begun building something sustainable. Central to that transformation is Valentina Russo. All eyes turned to Valentina. She felt her face flush, but kept her expression composed. Valentina has proven herself invaluable to this family, Leonardo said, standing beside his brother. Her strategic vision has guided our legitimization. Her financial brilliance has protected our interests. Her courage has earned respect from our allies and enemies alike. She's become essential to everything we're building. Which brings us to our announcement, Lorenzo said. I'm asking Valentina to marry me. The room exploded in surprised reactions. Valentina's heart stopped. This wasn't how they discussed handling things. Lorenzo was supposed to, and I'm asking her to accept that marriage as a partnership of equals, Leonardo added, his voice strong. Lorenzo will be her husband legally, but I will remain her partner in all other ways. The three of us will lead this family together, bringing different strengths to create something stronger than any of us could build alone. The silence that followed was absolute. Valentina looked between the brothers, understanding dawning. They'd planned this. Together, they'd found a solution that honored their feelings while meeting their world's expectations. An elderly uncle spoke first, his voice thoughtful. This is unprecedented. So is everything else we've done, Lorenzo replied. And it's working. The family is stronger, more respected, more profitable than we've been in decades. Why? Because we're willing to do things differently. What you're proposing, an aunt said carefully, is that this woman will marry Lorenzo but maintain an arrangement with Leonardo. We're proposing, Leonardo said firmly, that Valentina will be family. Completely, officially, protected and honored. How we structure that internally is our business. What matters to the family is that she's committed to our success, and we're committed to her protection. Another cousin spoke up, surprisingly supportive. The other families already respect her. I've heard talk. They see her as a power behind the Ducas, making us smarter and more dangerous. If formalizing that through marriage strengthens our position, I support it. The discussion continued for over an hour. Questions about succession, about appearances, about what this meant for family tradition. Lorenzo and Leonardo answered everything with calm authority, presenting their unconventional proposal as strategic brilliance rather than personal indulgence. Finally, the eldest uncle, who'd been silent throughout, spoke. Valentina, you haven't said anything. What do you think of this proposal? Valentina stood, aware of every eye on her. I think Lorenzo and Leonardo are the bravest men I've ever known. Not because they're willing to challenge tradition, but because they're willing to be honest about what actually works. They've taught me that family isn't about following rules. It's about building something worth protecting. She looked at Lorenzo, then Leonardo. I love them both. That's my truth. And they're offering me a way to honor that love, while also honoring this family's needs. And so yes, my answer is yes. The family's approval wasn't unanimous, but it was sufficient. The gathering ended with cautious acceptance and more than a few private conversations. But the decision was made. Valentina would marry Lorenzo de Luca, with Leonardo standing as best man and partner. And together, They would lead the family into a new era. The engagement period was surprisingly traditional. Lorenzo gave Valentina a ring that had belonged to his grandmother, a simple but elegant emerald surrounded by diamonds. Leonardo gave her a locket containing photographs of the three of them, a private acknowledgement of their bond. They planned a wedding that balanced tradition with their unique circumstances. It would be held at the family chapel, attended by the extended family and their closest allies, and everything would appear completely conventional to the outside world. But in private, the three of them planned their real future. "We need to establish clear boundaries," Valentina insisted during one planning session. "For our sanity, and for the family's stability. What does this arrangement actually look like day to day?" Lorenzo pulled out a document. Of course he'd created a document. "I propose we maintain the current living arrangement. You between us, separate but connected. Publicly, you're my wife. Privately, you're our partner. We make major decisions together, all three of us." "What about children?" Leonardo asked quietly. It was the question they'd been avoiding. Valentina took a breath. "If that happens, any child will be Lorenzo's legally, but raised by all three of us. No secrets, no ambiguity about family structure." "And if someone challenges this arrangement," Lorenzo asked, "if family or enemies try to use it against us?" "We stand together," Valentina said firmly. "No apologizing, no hiding, no shame. What we're building works. Anyone who can't accept that isn't really family." The wedding day arrived with perfect weather. The family chapel was filled with flowers. The guests were elegantly dressed, and Valentina wore a gown that made her feel like she was stepping into a Renaissance painting. Her mother was there, finally understanding the full scope of Valentina's life with the De Lucas. Her sister Bianca stood as maid of honor, having grown to genuinely love both brothers. Extended family filled the pews, and representatives from allied families watched with interest. But when Valentina walked down the aisle, she only saw Lorenzo and Leonardo. Lorenzo stood at the altar in a perfectly tailored suit, his expression serious, but his eyes warm with love. Leonardo stood beside him as best man, and the look he gave her held everything they couldn't say publicly. The ceremony was traditional. Vows were exchanged, rings placed, pronouncements made. Valentina became Valentina De Luca legally and officially. But when the priest said, "You may kiss the bride," Lorenzo's kiss was gentle and profound, and over his shoulder, Valentina met Leonardo's eyes and saw his smile. At the reception, she danced with Lorenzo first, an elegant waltz that demonstrated the partnership they'd built. Then Leonardo cut in, and his embrace was warmer, more familiar, and completely natural. Anyone watching would see a close family, brothers sharing the celebration. But Valentina felt the deeper truth in every touch. During his best man speech, Leonardo spoke with careful honesty. "My brother is the smartest man I know. He sees patterns others miss, plans moves years in advance, and never settles for less than excellence. That's why I know his choice of wife is perfect. Valentina matches his brilliance and challenges his assumptions. She makes him better. She makes all of us better." He raised his glass. "To Lorenzo and Valentina, may your partnership build the future we're all working toward. And may you always remember that family is defined by commitment, not convention." The toast was met with applause, and Valentina saw approval in the eyes of family members who'd been skeptical. Leonardo had reframed their arrangement as strength, not scandal. The evening ended with Valentina, Lorenzo, and Leonardo stealing away to a quiet terrace overlooking the gardens. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. "Are you happy?" Lorenzo asked quietly, his arm around her waist. Yes, Valentina answered honestly. Terrified, but happy. Good terrified or bad terrified? Leonardo asked from her other side, his hand finding hers. Good terrified. The kind that comes with building something unprecedented. She looked between them. We're going to face challenges, people who don't understand, situations that test us. But I believe in what we're building. I believe in us. So do I, Lorenzo said. Always have, Leonardo added. They made a pact that night, the three of them together under the stars. They would protect each other, support each other, and face whatever came with honesty and courage. Their arrangement might be unconventional, but it was theirs, and it worked. 2 years later, the Duca empire had been almost completely transformed. 90% of operations were legitimate businesses, shipping companies, construction firms, investment portfolios, all operating within legal boundaries. The remaining 10% was being systematically shut down, with families affected receiving transition support from funds Valentina had established. The other crime families watched in amazement, as the Ducas proved legitimacy could be profitable. Some began their own transitions, seeking Valentina's consulting expertise. She'd become known in their world as the woman who'd changed the game, who'd shown that evolution was possible. Her mother and sister lived in a beautiful apartment near the villa, fully protected, and finally understanding the complexity of Valentina's life. Bianca had graduated university and was working in the legitimate Duca operations, bringing fresh perspective to their modernization. Valentina's days were filled with work she found meaningful, helping build legal empires, supporting community initiatives, and strategizing with Lorenzo and Leonardo about the future they were creating. Her nights were filled with love. Sometimes Lorenzo's intellectual intensity, sometimes Leonardo's passionate warmth. Always the sense of being completely known and completely accepted. They hosted a Sunday dinner tradition, gathering extended family weekly to maintain connection and share progress. At one such dinner, Lorenzo made an announcement that surprised everyone. The Duca family is establishing a foundation, he said, dedicated to supporting small businesses and community development in underserved areas. Valentina will serve as director, Leonardo will manage community relations, and I'll oversee strategic planning. It was the final step in their transformation, from criminal empire to force for positive change. The foundation would be their legacy, the proof that people could choose to become better than their origins. After dinner, Valentina stood in the garden with both brothers. Looking out over the property, they'd transformed from a fortress into a home. Do you ever regret it? Leonardo asked. Choosing this complicated life with us? Valentina smiled, taking both their hands. Every choice worth making is complicated. You taught me that. What we've built, this family, this work, this love, it's worth every complication. Some people will never understand, Lorenzo said quietly. Some people will, Valentina countered. And those are the people who matter. We're building something new, something better. Not because it's easy, but because it's right. She looked at the life they'd created. The legitimate businesses, the protected communities, the family bound by choice rather than blood. They'd taken an impossible situation and made it work through honesty, courage, and genuine love. I need you both to survive, she'd admitted once, standing in a warehouse facing death. She'd meant it then as desperate truth. Now, standing between Lorenzo and Leonardo in the garden of their home, she meant it as profound gratitude. They'd survived together, Oh, they'd thrive together. And they'd built something unprecedented. A family defined by love in all its complicated, unconventional, beautiful forms. The future stretched before them, full of challenges and possibilities, but they would face it together, all three of them, proving that the most powerful love stories are the ones brave enough to rewrite the rules. And that was worth everything. Did you fall in love with Lorenzo, Leonardo, and Valentina's unconventional journey? This story proves that real love doesn't follow society's rules. It writes its own. If this tale of courage, transformation, and choosing love over convention touched your heart, like this video, share it with someone who believes in rewriting the rules, and subscribe for more romance stories that dare to be different. Drop a comment below, Team Lorenzo or Team Leonardo? Or are you like Valentina, believing some hearts are big enough for both? Let's talk about it. Your next romance awaits. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story.